is a bunch of people who meet every 2 years or so. All my close friends, including Don, attend. Everyone wants Don to be the keynote speaker. Bill Gates, in particular, always wants it to be Don Keough. He just loves listening to him, because Don talks such sense and offers such inspiration. Don can tell you to go to hell so wonderfully you'll enjoy the journey. He is on my board at Berkshire Hathaway, because he is one of the very few guys I feel I can hand the keys over to. We go back almost 50 years together, to the time we lived opposite each other on Farnham Street here in Omaha. We were just two guys making a living for our families back then. If we had told you that one of us would become president of the Coca-Cola company, and the other would become head of Berkshire Hathaway, I'm sure you would have said I hope their parents have enough money to support these two. At one point I knocked on his door and asked him to invest $10,000 or so with me. He turned me down flat. I'd probably have turned me down too back then. Our families were great friends, the kids were always in and out of each other's houses. It was very tough on my kids when they had to move to Houston. There were a lot of tears that day when they moved away. It's interesting when you think of it. Don and I were living less than 100 yards away from where my future partner, Charlie Munger, had grown up. Don went to Houston and Atlanta, Charlie landed in Los Angeles. But we later reunited as close friends and business associates, all with a lot of Omaha still in us. Nowadays, of course, a lot of people say they are from Omaha for status reasons. After Don left Omaha we kept in touch over the years. I'd meet him at the Alfalfa Club or once we even met at the White House. Then he read an article in 1984 in which I praised Pepsi, preferably with a touch of cherry syrup in it. The next day he sent me their new product, Cherry Coke, and invited me to taste test the nectar of the gods. After I drank it I told him, forget about your testing. I don't know much about that stuff, but I do know this is a winner. I switched brands right away and immediately declared Cherry Coke the official soft drink of Berkshire Hathaway. A few years later I started buying Coke stock, but I didn't tell Don, because I felt he might have to tell the company lawyer, and who knows where that would have led. I didn't want to put him in an awkward position. Anyway, he called and said, you wouldn't happen to be buying a share or two of Coke stock, now would you? I told him, it so happens that I am. At the time we picked up 7.7% of the company. It was a straightforward decision, especially knowing that he was the president. I saw Coke in 1988 as a company that understood what it was doing and was doing the right thing, and was obviously enormously valuable as a result. If you wanted to invent a human personification of the Coca-Cola company, it would be Don Keough. He was in his Mr. Coke. He's of the Ben Franklin school, keep thy shop, and it will keep thee. Basically, what he has always done is do the right thing by Coca-Cola, and he believes that it will always do the right thing by him. Don's best ability is to cut to the chase on an issue, to cut through the bureaucratic fog. Keep it simple is his principle and mine too. Herbert Allen says that the only two businessmen he knew who could have become president if they had run for office were Jack Welch and Don Keough. I agree with that, they both had that natural brilliance. They are both people we can learn so much from. After all these years, every time I see Don Keough I feel as refreshed as I do after drinking a Cherry Coke. He never loses his carbonation. I've seen him on the board of Coke and now at Berkshire. Don is as enthusiastic and committed as ever, full of plans, energy, ideas, daring us all to dream. I am delighted that this book will help so many other people share in that unique Keough vision. Warren Buffett.
Yes, sir. My name is Tom Conrad, and I'm from McLean, Virginia, and I'm a shareholder. And I asked a question last year, Mr. Buffett, to you. I was struck with what you said, that it takes only 3 quality companies to invest in to be set for a lifetime. And I asked you the question last year, should I wait until the market goes down, or should I get in now? And you advised to get in now, and the 3 companies that I chose were Coca-Cola, Gillette, and Disney. And because of that advice, I was able to afford the ticket to come back this year to ask you a second question. And my question is this. I'm thinking of...
you ought to quit while you're ahead, but go ahead.
I'm thinking of expanding to a 4th company. The 4th company that I'm thinking of is McDonald's. And
I see.
I just wanted to ask you if you feel that McDonald's has the same ability to dominate the way Coca-Cola and Gillette has. And secondly, do you feel that if the answer is yes, that I should wait until the price comes down a bit or get in now? And that's my question.
Yeah. Would you like it to the 1/8 of a point, or shall we round off? We in the annual report we talked about Coca-Cola. In the annual report we talked about Coca-Cola and base business being what I call the inevitables, but that relating products with Gillette, it doesn't extend necessarily everything they do, but fortunately in both those companies those are very important products. I would say that in the food business you would never get the total certainty of dominance that you would get in products like Coca-Cola and Gillette. People move around in the food business from where they eat from. They may favor McDonald's, but they will go to different places at different times. And somebody starts shaving with a Gillette Sensor Plus is very unlikely to go elsewhere, in my view. And so they do not. You never would get in the food business, in my judgment, quite the inevitability that you would get in the soft drink business with a Coca-Cola. You'll never get it again in the soft drink business. I mean, it took 100 in the soft drink business. I mean, it took 100. I guess the 1886. So they get to the point where they are, and the infrastructure is incredible, and so I wouldn't put it quite in the same class in terms of inevitability. That doesn't mean it can be a better stock investment depending on the price. But you're not going to get the price from me, and knowing Charlie, I doubt it can be a better stock investment depending on the price. But you're not going to get the price from me, and knowing Charlie, I doubt if you can get the price from him, but we'll give him a chance. He's breathing, folks. He's breathing.
We've got this down to a routine. So I have nothing to add, Warren.
Okay.
Went back before that as the Candler family, and they went back. They bought it for $2,000, the whole business. Asa Candler back in the late 1880s in a couple of purchases. So now he goes public in 1919, $40 a share. 1 year later, it's selling for $19, gone down 50% in 1 year. Now you might think that's some kind of disaster, and you might think that sugar prices increased and the bottlers were rebellious and a whole bunch of things. You could always find a few reasons why that wasn't the ideal moment to buy it. Years later, you'd have seen the Great Depression, and you'd have seen World War II, and you'd seen sugar rationing, and you'd seen thermonuclear weapons, and the whole thing. There's always a reason. But in the end, if you'd bought one share for $40 and reinvested the dividends, it'd be worth about $5 million now. And that factor so overrides anything else. I mean, if you're right about the business, you'll make a lot of money. And the timing part of it is a very tricky thing. So I don't worry about any given event if I've got a wonderful business, what it does to next year or something of the sort. Their price controls have been in this country at various times, and that's fouled up even the best of businesses. I mean, I wouldn't be able to raise the price on December 26th of See's Candy if we had price controls, and we've had them in this country. But that doesn't make it a lousy business if that happens to happen, because you're not going to have price controls forever. We had them in the early 70s. So the wonderful business. You can figure out what will happen. You can't figure out when it will happen. You don't want to focus too much on when. You want to focus on what. If you're right about what, you don't have to worry about when very much.
My name is Jean-Philippe Kramers, and I'm coming from London, England. I have a question regarding Coca-Cola. The first part is, are you worried that the earnings of Coca-Cola might continue to be affected by the weakness in the emerging markets and the strength of the dollar over the next few years? And the second part is on the P/E ratio of Coca-Cola at 35 times earnings. Are you worried about the potential rise in interest rates? And is it linked to your views on inflation that you are not worried about the rise in interest rate? Thank you.
Well, in relation to the strength of the dollar, which means that profits in foreign currencies don't translate into as many dollars, we don't have any big feeling on that. I mean, if we had strong feelings about the dollar's behavior vis-a-vis the yen or the euro or the pound or whatever it might be, we could give vent to those views by actually buying or selling large amounts of foreign exchange. We don't know which way the dollar is going to go. So I have nothing in my mind in regard to any decision on buying or selling Coke that would relate to any prediction in my mind about the course of the dollar. The earnings of Coke have been affected by the strength of the dollar in the last few years, particularly the strength against the yen when it went from 80 odd to 140 odd. That was a huge hit in terms of what in terms of yen translation into dollars from those profits, and the strength of the dollar generally would hurt. But looking forward, I don't have any prediction on that. It's in Coke's interest to have countries around the world prosperous. I mean, they will benefit from increased prosperity, increased standards of living throughout the world. I think we'll see that over any 10 or 20 year period. I think people's preference for Coke will do nothing but grow, Coca-Cola products. So what I am concerned about is share of market, and then what I call share of mind. In other words, what do people think about Coca-Cola now compared to 10 years ago or 20 years ago? What are they going to think about it 10 years from now? Coca-Cola has a marvelous share of mind around the world. Everybody in the world almost has something in their mind about Coca-Cola products, and overwhelmingly it's favorable. You can't, try to think of 3 other companies like it. I can't do it in terms of that ubiquity of good feeling, essentially, about the product. We measure it by unit cases sold and by shares outstanding, and we want a lot more unit cases sold, and we like the idea of fewer shares outstanding over time. I'll be giving you that same answer 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, and I think there'll be a lot more unit cases sold then. It is true that the case growth slowed starting in the second half of last year and continuing through the first quarter of this year. But that's happened from time to time in the past. In my view, that is not it's not an important item. It may be an important item in what the stock does, in a 6-month period or a 1-year period, but we'll be around 10 years from now, and Coca-Cola will be around 10 years from now. And right now we own 8.1 or 2% of Coca-Cola, and we'll probably own a larger percentage 10 years from now because they'll probably repurchase some stock. The PE ratio of Coke, like virtually every other leading company in the world, strikes us as, they all strike us as being quite full. That doesn't mean they're going to go down. But it does mean that our enthusiasm for buying more of these wonderful companies is less than it was when the PE ratios were substantially less. Ideally, those are the kind of companies we want to buy more of over time. We understand their business. My guess is that there's a reasonable chance, at least, that sometime in the next 10 years we buy more shares of either Coke or Gillette or American Express or some of those other wonderful companies we own. We do not like the PE ratios generally, but again, I stress that does not mean they're going down. It just means that we got spoiled in terms of how much we got for our money in the past, and we hope that we get spoiled again. Charlie?
Yeah, if what matters to you is what you think Coke is going to look like 10 years out or even further out, you don't really pay much attention to short-term economic developments in this country or that, or currency rates or any other such thing. They don't really help you in making the 10 or 15-year projection, and that's the one we're making. So we have tuned out all this noise, as it's called in what communications networks. Tune out the noise, and if you look at the big picture, we think Coke is fine.
It's hard to think of a better business in the world among big businesses. There's obviously companies that are starting from much smaller bases that could grow faster, but it's hard to think of a much more solid business.
Good morning, Warren and Charlie. I'd like to address the domestic Coke business. It seems to me that Coke has been pulling back from what former great CEO Robert Guazzetta often said, and I paraphrase, we can't control what soft drinks people buy at retail, but in public venues, including food service, we can control that. We've all heard about the marquee losses that Coca-Cola has had, such as the NFL, United Airlines, and emerging restaurant brands like Baja Fresh Mexican Grill. But they're also losing contracts with major or minor league baseball, college, and high school venues. Furthermore, it's my understanding that our competitor PepsiCo has been the fastest growing domestic beverage company for 3 consecutive years. My question is, has Coke's vision changed? And is my perception that the domestic fountain division has lost their way correct?
Yeah, no, I would not say that's correct, but I understand the reason for the question, because there is the question always of the marquee type accounts. I mean, the truth is, either of the 2 major colas that are going to be sold and associated with, say, the Olympics or Disney World or whatever it is going to lose a lot of money if only directly thought of in terms of those contracts. But there is that association over years. I mean, Coke wants to be where people are happy, and they want that in people's minds, and that tends to be, you know, it's sporting events, it's the Disneylands, Disney Worlds of the world. But in the end, can you have a determination to be at every one of them at any price? And the answer obviously is no. It was sort of interesting. About 5 years ago, or thereabouts, Coke took Venezuela essentially away from Pepsi. Venezuela was one of the few countries in the world in which Pepsi was the leader, and that was because the Cisneros family had developed the business down there very early. So Pepsi had 70 or 80% of the business, and in sort of a midnight raid, Coke bought the Cisneros operation, converted it all to Coke overnight, flew 747s in because they didn't want to have this, they wanted it to be a surprise, and they just reversed the whole situation in Venezuela. And it actually, whether that is going to turn out to be smart or not is another question, because they paid a lot of money to do it. But in any event, Pepsi was very upset, and so the University of Nebraska pouring rights came up very shortly thereafter, and the universities, as you know, bid out these things to get sort of an exclusive to a given university. And Pepsi came in and bid about twice as much for the University of Nebraska pouring rights as was the sort of the standard in terms of per student at universities throughout the country, at Penn State or something. And I like to think that they were trying to stick it in the eye of Coke by doing that in Nebraska. And I feel that the University of Nebraska really should give me credit for about $5 million a year of contribution to the university, because I don't think Pepsi would have done it if it hadn't been in Nebraska. Now, the question is, people at Coke called me and they said, you know, do you want us to go up against this? And I said, you know, no. It's nice to have everybody at the University of Nebraska drinking Coke, but if we've got everybody at Penn State drinking Coke, I mean, they're probably worth as much as potential Coke customers. So there is this bit where one organization or the other, particularly if they've lost one in the immediate past, may overbid a little for the next one. And, you know, for United Airlines, the question is how far do you let United or whomever it is drive you in terms of making that specific deal? I would say that in something like the Olympics, you know, I think Eastman Kodak made a huge mistake when they let Fuji take away the Los Angeles Olympics 20 years ago or so, because it allowed Fuji to get put on a mental parity to a degree with a Kodak, whereas Kodak had always owned that, and now Fuji was there with Coca-Cola and IBM and a few premier companies, and it was a mistake. So in the end, you end up overpaying in any kind of an objective quantitative sense for most of these marquee properties, but you can't, it'd be foolish to think that you had to have them all. Coca-Cola, actually Pepsi-Cola, colas have generally declined somewhat as a percentage of per capita consumption in the United States, and Pepsi-Cola has lost considerably more than Coke. What has kept Pepsi doing well basically is Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew has been a very successful product for Pepsi, and that has gained share in carbonated soft drinks.
carbonated soft drinks, the average person in this room drinks 64 ounces of liquid a year. Carbonated soft drinks are just under 30% of that. And beer and milk are each about 11 or 12%. They're both down from 10 years ago. Carbonated soft drinks are up substantially. Bottled water is up somewhat, but the only two categories that are really up are carbonated soft drinks from 10 years ago and bottled water. Coffee's down significantly. You think Starbucks has done a lot, but coffee just keeps going down and down and down. If you look at Coke, of the almost 30% of liquids consumed in the United States, they have about 43% of the 30 in their arena. So you're talking 13% of all liquids, tap water, everything else that the American people drink is a Coca-Cola product. And it's off a couple tenths of 1% from the high, but it's higher than 5 years ago. It's higher than 10 years ago. And actually in the first quarter, it did quite well too. So I think there's been I'm sure there's been no loss of marketing vigor. Doug Daft is a marketer at heart. He comes from he's put together the same way as along the same lines as Don Keough. There'll never be another Don Keough, but Doug is the same type of guy. He's in tune with the product. And if I had to bet, I would bet the market share of Coke in terms of both carbonated soft drinks and in terms of water. I mean, the gains in Dasani last year were like 95%. In the first quarter, they were about 60%. Those are huge gains. And Pepsi got an earlier start with Aquafina, but Coke has almost closed that gap. Coke is a very, very powerful marketing organization. Sold 0.7 billion cases. There's nothing like it in the world, and I do not think they've lost their focus or drive in any way whatsoever. Charlie?
I've got nothing to add.
Might try vanilla Coke too. It'll be out next month.
This is Phil McCall from Connecticut. I wonder, it's been some time since you've commented on Coca-Cola, and now that you're off the board, I wonder if you feel free to comment on it.
Yeah, well, I won't make particularly different comments than from when I was on the board, but Coca-Cola is a fabulous company. Coca-Cola will sell over 21 billion cases of various products, more Coke than anything else, around the world this year, and it goes up every year. It's interesting, the stock in 1997 or 98, whenever it was, sold over $80 a share when the earnings were, I don't remember whether they were $1.50 a share or something like that. And the earnings then were not as of good quality as the earnings are now when, they were $2.17 or something like that. And every year they account for a little greater share of the liquids consumed by people in the world. They make fabulous returns on invested capital. It's a business that has, exclude the bottling part of it, it has 5 or 6 billion of tangible assets and makes a similar amount. So there are not lots of big businesses in the world that earn 100% pre-tax on tangible assets. And it'll be a great business, and it's been a great business. The stock got to what, in retrospect, clearly was a ridiculous level, but you can't hold the present management, Neville Isidell, responsible for that. And if the company sells 4 or 5% more units this year than last year, and the population of the world goes up 2%, it just means that more people are putting that particular source of liquid down their throats than the year before, and that's been going on ever since 1886. So it strikes us as a really wonderful business that sold at a very silly price some years back, and you can definitely fault me for not selling the stock. I always thought it was a wonderful business, but clearly at 50 times earnings, it was a silly price on the stock. So we like it. We'll own it 10 years from now, in my view. Charlie?
No more.
peanut brittle gets caught occasionally, but it's worth it. It's worth it, definitely.
Push it near me and
What? Oh, you want some, huh?
Talk about one of the issues that came up repeatedly at the shareholders meeting. Actually, it only came up a couple of times, but I did get a lot of questions related to it in my email box where shareholders were sending things in. And that's Coca-Cola. Joe already alluded to that this morning. And we'll talk a little bit about what has happened. I know we've had a lot to say, but there was some criticism. Some people who didn't understand why, if you thought Coca-Cola's equity plan was excessive, you didn't say something before the vote and you didn't take your 9.1% of the outstanding shares and vote no.
Yeah, we had no desire, never will have a desire to go to war with Coca-Cola. I mean, it's a wonderful company. It's treated us wonderfully. The management's always been totally candid with us. I think we've got the right leader. I'm sure we've got the right leader in Muhtar Kent. So we had no desire to go to war, but we did think that the program was excessive. And with those two beliefs, we felt the best thing to do was to express our opinions privately to the management, who listened carefully, and to abstain from voting at this meeting. And we think, I know we'll have some very constructive discussions with Coca-Cola between now and when they implement any plan.
Barron's out over the weekend, and there was an article in the back of it from Carl Icahn. I know you're friends with Carl, and I know that you're both on the Giving Pledge together, but this article says why Buffett is wrong on Coke. He's got a different style than you do.
I hope so.
Do you think that, first of all, what do you think about what Carl said? And second of all, do you think that your style will be effective in this situation?
Yeah, I do think our styles will be effective, and I think our style actually would be more effective than a style that might be proposed by Carl. But Carl goes into other types of businesses, and he goes in where, often at least, he goes in where there's a problem. There isn't a problem at Coca-Cola. There was a plan that was proposed that was excessive. It's very easy to make it non-excessive. All you have to do is spread the authorization over more years than the 4 years that they talked about having it in the proxy, and that's easy to do. So whether it actually turns out to be excessive will depend on the actions they take subsequent to this, because they have not locked it in stone that they're going to use the stock over 4 years. But I would say that generally, or frequently at least, Carl is working with managements with different attitudes, and they probably have a different attitude toward him than Coke has toward me.
Have you spoken with Muhtar Kent to this point? When we talked with you on Thursday, you had not.
I've not talked to him since the meeting.
Since the Coca-Cola meeting?
Since Coca-Cola's meeting, which was on the 23rd.
Okay, so that was about a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always wondered is how Berkshire Hathaway really works with the chairman and the vice chairman. How often do you two talk? Because, Charlie, you're in California.
Way less than we used to, because we know what the other thinks.
Yeah.
We're not wasting a lot of time checking what we already know.
Yeah, we're like an old married couple. We just sort of grunt at each other, but we know what the grunts mean. But originally, and this was when phone conversation was fairly expensive and we were not rich, but we would talk, for hours, a lot of days. But now
You know, we may talk once every 2 weeks or something like that.
You did say, though, Warren, that you spoke with Charlie about the Coca-Cola decision before you came to any conclusions. What did you two think about that as you were talking?
It took about 10 seconds.
Really?
I do not find that a difficult decision.
The abstention or the...
I thought he did it just right.
Every little one.
He complained a little, but not too vociferously. I think that was just the right tone. And with compliments which were deserved to the management of Coca-Cola. Right. I thought he handled it perfectly.
You are a really keen observer of economies, of consumers, of behavior, and you also, in your annual report this year, talked about buying wonderful businesses at fair prices versus fair businesses at wonderful prices. How do you think about that in terms of how it contributed to the incredible success of Berkshire Hathaway and how you see the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I was taught to buy very cheap stocks. So I'd look at the numbers and I ended up buying what I call cigar butts. They were stocks that were so cheap, they were like finding a cigar butt. It might look kind of soggy and unpleasant, but it had one free puff left in it. And so, but the problem with that, of course, is you take the free puff and then you have to go around looking for another cigar butt. And finally, I had a partner that straightened me out and told me that it was much better, as Butard quoted, to buy really wonderful businesses at a fair price instead of looking around for these things that had one puff left in them. And if you're looking for a wonderful business, it was hard to beat Coca-Cola. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you. How do you see the economy shaping in the next 3 years or so?
Well, we've been...
And the world.
Yeah, well, we've been coming back in the United States since the fall of 2009. And interestingly enough, we've come back at a reasonable, not a fantastic rate, but a reasonable rate consistently. Though from time to time, people have thought it's going to accelerate a lot faster or that it decelerated, and they talked about a double dip, if you remember that, a few years ago. But this country always comes back. I mean, just think about it. You know, if you go back to 1776, you fly over the country like I did this morning, and there wasn't anything there. I mean, everything has come from this incredible system we have, and we've still got the secret sauce. I mean, this is the mother lode of opportunity in the United States, and you know, real GDP per capita in my lifetime has increased sixfold. One person's lifetime, 6 for 1, and the game isn't over. We will always bet on this country at Berkshire.
Where do you think the growth for a company that has not just one product anymore, but 3,000 products and growing rapidly, where do you think the growth is going to mostly come from, in your opinion?
Well, I think the consumer is going to tell us that. You know, I mean, and they'll tell us different things, perhaps in different parts of the world. But you know, every great company listens to its consumer, and of course, this company's done that throughout its history. I mean, that does not require any change in your DNA or anything of the sort. And then you just have to make it extremely convenient for people to buy it. You have to keep the price reasonable, and it's interesting. I drink classic Coke at the office, and I drink cherry Coke at home. And you know, it's an incredible combination. Try it.
Give Mr. Warren Buffett a very warm thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Coca-Cola continues to sell more drinks, wider portfolio than they used to have many years ago, more every year than the year before. But the growth rate in carbonated soft drinks 20 years ago was a lot greater than it is today. It's still very strong. I mean, I think they sell like 1.9 billion 8-ounce servings of some drink every day, and a lot of that's Coca-Cola. So it's a very good business, but the growth rate has slowed down
considerably from where it was, we'll say, 20 years ago.
We know that the company just recently announced that it's stepping up the restructuring of its North American operations. It's trying to push ahead the move to get out of Coca-Cola bottlers.
Yeah.
Is that the right move?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, they bought up the bottling operations, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, with the idea of refranchising them later on. So, I mean, this is part of a plan. They drifted in 1899 for $1. They made a deal with 3 guys from Chattanooga. It was the dumbest deal ever made. They gave in perpetuity the rights in almost the entire United States to these guys for the bottling operation, and that led to all kinds of things over time. Then those fellows made sub-arrangements and all of that sort of thing. Working their way out of that, it started 40 or 50 years ago, and my friend Don Keough had a big part of the job. And they, as he said, he loved and threatened and cajoled and pleaded, all these things to try and get this thing into a more logical arrangement. And they've been working on that for a long time, and this is part of a very long-term plan to have the most logical distribution system that fits today's retailing. I mean, there weren't Walmarts and those around 100 years ago. So you had local accounts entirely then. Now you have big national accounts, and it's a different world. But it's been expensive, been very expensive to reconfigure the distribution arrangement.
What was the purchase of CCE, Coca-Cola Enterprises? Was that the right move back in 2010?
They probably felt it was the only move to, but they created CCE, of course, 20 years earlier. I mean, it's been a tough problem to align the interests of the bottlers and the they call it concentrate manufacturing part of it. And it's different by different countries. It's not an easy puzzle, but they had decided that to have the United States in particular more logically configured, reinvigorated in terms of the bottling partners they might have and so on. They've got a terrific bottler, for example, that they've added in Chicago. I know the people. So the scorecard isn't in on it. They paid a lot of money, and they're not going to get back that much money, it doesn't look to me like, in terms of when they refranchise it. But that isn't really the key. The real key is how vigorous the system is once it's been put in place. And they've accelerated the timetable for getting it refranchised.
The company named a new president and chief operating officer, James Quincy, back in August. Do you know him?
I met him once, and I've got a dinner coming up with him here pretty soon. Everything I know about him is good.
Okay. There's a question from a viewer that comes in asking, this is from Shop Two Friends, will 3G buy Coca-Cola in the next few years?
I don't think so. No, Coca-Cola is not for sale.
I drink probably 5 12-ounce Cokes a day, and that's about 700 calories. And I've been doing it more or less all my life. I can't imagine anybody that feels better than I do. I mean, I'm happy. I enjoy life. You know, and I've always wondered if I'd had a twin and he had to eat broccoli and asparagus and Brussels sprouts and done it every day, and I'd been drinking my Coke and eating potato chips, and there's some cookies that also, you know, have 100 calories per ounce. You know, which of us, I think the other guy would be gone. I mean, I think he probably would have committed suicide, actually. And he certainly wouldn't feel as good about life as I do. I feel good every day.
It is an example of what's called a cascade, where consensus becomes fact. And we've had in the past that red meat causes heart disease, which we now know probably isn't. It's not that simple. And I've talked to Andrew about this. Looking at sugar's link to diabetes or obesity, even the best study that I've seen, there's all these caveats that it's impossible to do a controlled experiment where you get rid of all the other external factors to actually pinpoint what's going on there, because there's genetics, there's all these different things. But it becomes, you know, consensus suddenly becomes fact. And it's just, you know, and it's hurting Coca-Cola right now. And as a shareholder, you know, I mean, there's also microaggression and safe zones. And I mean, the world is a little bit crazy right now, Warren, in terms of political correctness.
Yeah, well, I'll make 2 points. I do think you live longer if you're happy. On balance, I would bet on the person who's extremely happy, living longer than somebody that's sour every day of the year. But beyond that, I mean, if if you eat 3,500 calories and you burn up 2,700, I don't care what it is, you're going to get fat. And it's a question of how much you put in and what your metabolism is. And at the annual meeting, we had talked about Coke in the early part. And when I went to lunch, I bought 3 candy bars, and each one of those candy bars had over 200 calories, whereas a 12-ounce can of Coke has a little under 150. So one of those candy bars, you're getting more calories and you're getting a lot of sugar, and I just think it's a little crazy. They've been selling Coke since 1886. They sold sell 1.9 billion 8-ounce servings a day. That's 693 billion servings a year of Coca-Cola products, one kind or another. And if you want to eat way the hell more than you burn up,
right?
You're going to have some health. There's still very good business. I mean, if you've got a brand, if you look at the return on tangible assets, Coca-Cola or Kraft Heinz or anything, you've got a very good business. It doesn't look as good as it did 5 or 10 years ago. In other words, there's 2 reasons, I think, for that. One is people seem to me to be a little more willing to experiment with different diets or foods than they were 5 or 10 years
Some
ago.
people would say healthy diets, where they won't eat things that are packaged. They think that's bad for them. It's a millennial attitude, too.
Yeah,
they won't buy some of the old brands.
There's certainly, that's a factor. I think it may even extend beyond millennials to some degree. People are more, well, they've gotten used to more change in their lives generally. And so I would say that there's still a huge loyalty factor, but it is not as strong as it was 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. And secondly, there's always been a struggle between the retailer and the brands. I mean, you can't. I mean, that's built into the American market system. And I would say that the retailers and they've always had private label brands. In some other countries, private label has been much stronger than the United States, for example. And the private label brands are priced below the big brands, and the retailer, every time a retailer meets up with a packaged goods salesperson, they're arguing for lower prices and better deals. And I would say that their hand becomes stronger as the Costco's and the Walmarts and in other countries, as they become stronger, the struggle can tilt a little bit one way or the other. I think a few years ago, I think Costco dropped Coca-Cola. And that's a real test if you want to. And of course, Sam's Club at that time started pouring it on with more Coke and everything. And that Coca-Cola's a pretty strong brand, so that Costco could decide to do that. But if Costco decided to drop a bunch of other brands that you could name, or Walmart decided to drop them. I mean, the packaged good company might feel it more than the retailer would feel it, and they would come to terms faster. It's an interesting dynamic, and it's gone somewhat against the packaged good companies. They're still good, very, very good businesses.
Is that dynamic between the retailer and the packaged goods companies, is that a pendulum swing that swings back, or is this a new?
No, and not necessarily. No, I mean, you've got these German discounters coming over here now, and each company's got some muscle. And if you've been selling, whether it's Coca-Cola or whatever food you may have eaten as a kid or something like that, I mean, you're pounding. You want the consumer, because you got to win with the consumer in the end. You've got to have a product that's strong enough that the retailer has to carry it to some degree, and where their private label, even though it's priced below it, does not draw volume away. And if you take Heinz ketchup, it's very, very, very hard to take share away from Heinz ketchup. It's hard to take share away from Philadelphia cream cheese, but I could name some other products where it's easier to take share away. And the consumer votes every day, and some things are affecting the consumer, like the feeling that other things are healthier or something of the sort. Price affects the consumer, but just the prevalence
strength of the retailer can affect the consumer too.
Is that why there's so much pressure for some of these packaged goods companies to get bigger, or for new deals to come in? Like, I'm going to take and wrap up with a lot of products, and then I have more heft against the retailers if they try and jerk me around with
you
their
don't get
brands.
if Coca-Cola were to buy, they've got the world's greatest distribution system, so they can push liquids through that. I don't know whether they could push cream of wheat, or something through their distribution system. Obviously, a great distribution system is worth an enormous amount, and like I say, Coca-Cola has a great one. And Coca-Cola, incidentally, they're selling 5% more liquids. They are selling 100 ounces of liquids per capita in the whole world. 7 billion people are drinking a Coca-Cola product, and they're drinking at the rate of 100 ounces a year. That's substantial. Leaves a lot of ounces to go, but they are selling more ounces of liquid. They've got more brands now, but they are selling than they've ever sold, and it grows year by year, and it's growing. And James Quincy is doing a sensational job on that, and first quarter even showed it. But if you've got a brand that's kind of lost out there or something of the sort, it's hard to get shelf space, and the retailer is going to stock what will move, and sometimes that involves price. But what you want to have is a product the retailer has to have.
Removing your own beverage consumption from the equation. Please explain directly why we Berkshire Hathaway shareholders should be proud to own Coke.
I would find quite spurious the fact that somebody says if you're eating 3,500 or so calories a day and you're consuming 27 or 800, and some of the 3,500 is Coca-Cola, to lay it any particular obesity related illnesses on the Coca-Cola you drink. You have the choice of consuming more than you use. I mean, and I make a choice to eat or to get 700 calories from this. I like fudge a lot, peanut brittle, and I am a very, very, very happy guy. And I don't know, I think, and I'm serious about this, I think if you were happy every day, it may be hard to measure, but I think you're going to live longer as well. So there may be a compensating factor. I really wish I'd had a twin, and that twin had eaten broccoli his entire life, and we both consumed the same number of calories. I know I would have been happier, and I think the odds are fairly good I would have lived longer.
I think the people who ask questions like that one always make one ghastly error that's really inexcusable. They measure the detriment without considering the advantage. Well, that's really stupid. That's like saying we should give up air travel through airlines because 100 people die a year in air crashes or something. That would be crazy. The benefit is worth the risk. And if every person has to have about 8 or 10 glasses of water every day to stay alive, and it's pretty cheap and sensible and improves life to add a little extra flavor to your water and a little stimulation and a little calories if you want to eat that way, there are huge benefits to humanity in that, and it's worth having some disadvantage. We ought to have almost a law in the editorial, I'm sounding like Donald Trump, where these people shouldn't be allowed to cite the defects without citing the offsetting advantage. It's immature and stupid.
The most important thing is to be able to define which ones you can come to an intelligent decision on and which ones are beyond your capacity to evaluate. You don't have to be right about thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. You only have to be right about a couple. I met Bill Gates on July 5th, 1991. We were out in Seattle, and Bill said, "You've got to have a computer." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You can do your income tax on it." I said, "I don't have any income. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend." He said, "Well, you can keep track of your portfolio." And I said, "I only have one stock." I said, I mean,
he says, it's going to change everything. And I said, well, will it change whether people chew gum? And he said, well, probably not. And I said, well, will it change what kind of gum they chew? And not. And I said, well, then I'll stick to chewing gum and you stick to computers, you know. I don't have to understand all kinds of business. There's all kinds of business I don't understand. But there's thousands of opportunities there. I did understand the Bank of America, you know, and I'll be able, I'm able to do that. I'm able to understand some given percentage. But Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting. And in The Science of Hitting, he's got a diagram, shows him at the plate. And he's got the strike zone divided into 77 squares, each the size of a baseball. And he says, if I only swing at pitches in my sweet zone, which he shows there, and he has what his batting average would be, which is 400. If he had to swing at low outside pitches, but still in the strike zone, his average would be 230. He said the most important thing in hitting is waiting for the right pitch. Now, he was at a disadvantage because if the count was 0-2 or 1-2 or so on, even if that ball was down where he was only going to bat 230, he had to swing at it. In investing, there's no called strikes. People can throw Microsoft at me and, you know, you name it, any stock, General Motors, and I don't have to swing. And nobody's going to call me out on called strikes. I only get a strike called if I swing at a pitch and miss. So I can wait there and look at thousands of companies day after day, and only when I see something I understand and when I like the price at which it's selling, then if I swing, if I hit it, fine. If I miss it, it's a strike. But it's an enormously advantageous game. And it's a terrible mistake to think you have to have an opinion on everything. You only have to have an opinion on a few things. In fact, I've told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. You know, 4 or 5 will probably do it over time. So I don't worry too much about the things I don't understand. If you understand some of these businesses that are coming along and can spot things on, if you can spot on Amazon, for example, I mean, it's a tremendous accomplishment what Jeff Bezos has done. And I tip my hat to him. He's a wonderful businessman. He's a good guy, too. But could I have anticipated that he would be the success and 10 others wouldn't be? I'm not good enough to do that. But fortunately, I don't have to. You know, I don't have to form an opinion on Amazon. And I did form an opinion on the Bank of America, and I've formed an opinion on Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola's been around since 1886. There's 1.8 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products sold every day. Now, if you take 1 penny and get 1 penny extra, that's $18 million a day. And 18 million times 365 is 7 billion, 3 less 730 billion, or $6,570 million. So annually, $6,570 million from 1 penny. Do you think Coca-Cola is worth a penny more than, you know, Joe's Cola? I think so. So, you know, and I've got about 127 years of history that would indicate it. So those are the kind of decisions I like to make. And you may have an entirely different field of expertise than I would have, and probably much more up to date in terms of the kind of businesses that we're seeing evolve. And you can get very rich if you just understand a few of them and understand their future.
I have to tell you, Charles, you see that video of them in the golf cart. They usually do not make an appearance here this day before the annual shareholder meeting, the largest in the world, by the way. But we were able to catch up with them just as they were going backstage to meet with all the managers of their some 90 companies. And I had an opportunity to talk to them specifically. We're here at Coca-Cola. Since we landed yesterday, Team Countdown has spoken to a lot of people in Omaha, shareholders of Coca-Cola and Berkshire Hathaway, who, of course, late last year were not happy when Coca-Cola announced that it was possibly talking about making a partnership with a cannabis or a CBD or a marijuana type of company because it's sort of the new nascent industry that's out there. I specifically asked Warren and Charlie about that. Listen to their response.
I did talk to a Coca-Cola shareholder yesterday who said if Coke were to get into a cannabis or marijuana partnership, this person would sell their shares. How would you feel if Coke got into cannabis?
It would be a mistake.
Yeah, but we wouldn't sell it.
Why?
Because they've got such a wholesome image and cannabis doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's not very
Coca-Cola,
complicated.
there's something in everybody's mind in the world practically about Coca-Cola. I mean, they've got an awareness of a specific brand that is almost unequal. It may be unequal. You can say Coca-Cola in 200 countries and they know what you're talking about. And when they say it, when I say Coca-Cola to you, there's something in your mind. And I'm not sure that you would want to muddy that image a little bit.
Getting back to Coca-Cola, you mentioned that it would be a bad idea if it got into cannabis. I mean, why not? Doesn't it make sense?
Because it's such a wholesome brand and associated with happiness. Why do we want to associate it with a recreational drug?
Well, they have to grow.
I think that would be a terrible idea.
Okay.
We've got this down to a routine. So I have nothing to add.
Charlie?
I've got nothing to add.
Charlie? No more.
Hi, Warren. Charlie, John Norwood from West Des Moines, Iowa. Thank you so much for the annual meetings, and please don't move it to Dallas or some other place. I've got my system worked out here.
We won't.
Thank you. Hey, two quick questions. One is allocation of capital and how you wrestle with the operating companies and how much cash comes up to the operating companies or comes up to the mothership versus the operating companies. And you and Charlie, do you ever fight or argue, and any lessons over the years for how you manage your partnership of two? Thank you.
Yeah. Charlie and I have never had an argument. We met in when I was 29, he was 35. We're a little older now. And in those years, 55 years, we've disagreed on a lot of things. And it's just never led and never will lead to an argument. We argue with other people, but it hasn't occurred. I called Charlie on the Coca-Cola vote, and I said what the proxy statement said and everything. And said, "What do you think?" And we thought alike. Sometimes we don't think alike, and we never go away in the least bit mad if we don't.
Yeah, but most of the time we think alike. That's one of the problems. If one of us misses it, the other is likely to too.
Yeah, I would say that. Well, there's no question. If you look at the really bad mistakes we've made, I've made them. I'm probably a little more inclined toward action than Charlie. Would you say that's fair, Charlie? Or?
Well, you once called me the abominable no man.
Yeah. But you said over the weekend that he's called you something before.
Oh, the abominable no man.
Right.
But he likes that.